Hello, good evening. I'm Ryan Lester, and this is episode 24 of the Wolves Report, where tonight we'll be talking about Crystal Palace, talking about the bust-up between Hoover and Bruno, the wingbacks. Is it time for a tactical change? Taking as many questions as you can and looking ahead to Watford. Of course, we're joined by two of our regular pundits in the form of Tyler and Knocker. Good evening, gentlemen. And of course, tonight I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by some BBC radio royalty in the form of Mike Taylor. Good evening, Mike. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Hello to you, and I'm overbilled already for quite a lot.
Mike, your tweet was great earlier on. Really good. That really enjoyed that. So let's get stuck into it then. Palace was a tough one to swallow. West Ham was hard to swallow. Arsenal was really tough to swallow. So, Mike, just your initial take on the Palace game. You were there, obviously. You're following Wolves home and away for WM. What was your take on the Palace game?
It was a startlingly poor performance and much different to the West Ham game. Obviously, earlier in the season, you were well beaten at Selhurst Park. I thought this was a different beating, but it was rare to see an entire team all malfunction at the same time. And there wasn't really any coming back from the first half. You know, once you're two down here, they were a bit better in the second half, but it's a bit late by then to be getting back into it. It was always going to be scrambling. I was struck by how they were, for the first time, I thought they were physically out-muscled in a game this season. And it's too easy, in a way, to pick out certain individuals with that. But Wolves look lightweight. And the midfield plan that so often worked this season, and there's been plenty of other occasions where it's looked as though they might be a bit overmanned in midfield, and it hasn't happened. On Saturday, it was evident from quite early on that it was happening, and it never stopped. I thought they looked distracted, unsettled, and it was very much out of character and a real step down even from a West Ham.
I mean, guys, I mean, in our group chat, Tyler, Knocker, we spoke about the wing-backs at West Ham and how it didn't work, and how the one thing about the team we couldn't do again was pick those same wing-backs. But we did it. We expected something different. Whether his hands were tied, I don't know. But Knocker, why did it go so badly wrong again? Or did we know it was going to go so badly wrong again when you saw the team?
Yeah, I thought when we saw the team sheet, I think everyone was slightly concerned. But even when we lined up, it was worse. I mean, it looked to me like Podence was playing in a false nine position, which I couldn't get my head around when we've got Silva sat on the bench and Raul. He was just wrong. It was just wrong from the start. We were out-muscled in midfield, as Mike said. We were dominated all over the pitch. And I think, to be honest, if we'd have gone in 4 or 5 down at half-time, I don't think we could have complained because they were all over us. The wing-backs were a problem, but to be honest, I thought Marcel was probably one of our better players, especially in the second half, where we did improve slightly, but I think that's more a case of Palace had won the game and they were happy just to play it out. Well, we couldn't get any worse, no, but it was just collectively really, really poor. And I was just surprised because of going to Palace earlier on in the season and we were totally smashed in midfield, we were dominated, we were bullied. And we set up very similar in terms of the midfield. I was half expecting Dendoncker to come in and try and shore it up with a 3 to try and neutralise them in midfield and maybe put Hwang more tight up to Raul or Silva, whichever one got the nod. So the team sheet really, really caught me out. But the goals we conceded were horrendous. The first one is just a comedy of errors for me. I think Sarr should do better. I think Cody should do better. The second one, we have maybe 4 or 5 chances to get the ball clear, and we don't. It just keeps coming back at us. We give away a really poor penalty, and we don't score enough goals to concede the first goal, do we? So if we go 2 down, it's basically curtains after that.
I mean, Tyler, as Mike said at the start, then the whole team, pretty much everyone looked off it. I mean, as Knocker said, Marcel did okay defensively, but he's not a wing back. I mean, it's pretty hard, isn't it, Tyler, to draw? I know this is quite negative early on, but how do you draw a positive from a game like that? Where do you go from here? I mean,
I thought it was desperate. I think the two gentlemen have probably been quite polite that have spoken before me. I thought it was a desperate performance. It was like Burnley at home all over again. And if it had been 3-4-0 by half time, you couldn't have had a complaint at all. Knocker's right. It's like we're trying to have our own competition of giving away the worst goal of the season, the West Ham one. What Cody's doing, it's so easy for him to get it across. And I'm with you, Knocker Sarr's at fault as well. And Kilman, you could see that penalty coming as soon as the guy walked in the box. You're all just waiting for the challenge. There's been a bit of mention, and rightly so, if he's in the right place at the moment. That's totally understandable, isn't it? If he's not, but in a brutal world, if he isn't, then he might need to be pulled out of the team, mightn't he? But you're right, Ryan. I couldn't give you one positive. Maybe Johnny getting 60, 70 minutes in his legs is maybe the only one, and I'm clutching at straws, I think, to be honest.
But that's a Palace team in no form either, is it? I mean, I think they were was it 1-8 or something before they came into this one, and they played like a team. They played like a team full of confidence, and just such a bizarre performance.
There's two sides to it, and I would say that the reaction from the Palace reporters around us was that was their best performance for ages. So sometimes it's the case that one team plays badly, and other times it's one team plays particularly well. On Saturday, I think they were both true, and it really did show up in the first half.
Yeah, it was an absolute stinker. And for me, the biggest problem, I know we're going to talk about this quite a bit, was the wing-backs, because they wasn't actually wing-backs. They were two full-backs. And we learned at West Ham that Marcel or Hoover can't really play getting forward and offer the quality that Aït-Nouri and Semedo know. I know we're going to talk about Hoover in a bit, but if you're playing with guys at wing-back that can't be wing-backs, you're playing a back five. Therefore, then you're inviting a team onto you, and you're going to be pushed back from the start. That wasn't recognised at West Ham. We did it again. And I know this is an easy thing to say, but if you can't play the system with the correct players, then change the system. It might be easy for me to say now, but if you're playing with two fullbacks, you're a back five at home to Crystal Palace, who hadn't won in 8. Now, no disrespect to Crystal Palace. They were the better side from the off, stronger, faster, better plan, hungrier, no complaints at all. But there is an element for me that this was self-inflicted. Wolves can do better than this. We've seen Wolves go to Spurs and Man United and press and squeeze. We're at home to Palace. We invited them on and we got what we deserved. So why didn't Bruno change it? Is there a stubbornness set in there? Can someone put their finger on that?
We said about the West Ham game, didn't we? Left it till the 80th minute to go to a back four. No changes at half-time on Saturday, I thought was bizarre. I know we'd made one sub, and whether that was in the back of his mind, I don't know. But to come out with the same 11 and the same way of playing second half, but it literally was incredible. And what annoys me, not what annoys, but we mentioned it in the last podcast about flirting with the back four. If teams like Crystal Palace can play with the back four, that they were brilliant. The three behind them, big striker up front, two big demanding centre halves. I mean, it's quite simple, isn't it? And why we're playing a back three with two wing backs, like you said, Ryan, that can't get over the halfway line.
It's a back five then, isn't it?
You say the wing back. I thought the most battered one was the front three and how they set up, to be honest. I thought that was totally outrageous, but maybe I'm going a bit over the top.
I don't think you're going over the top at all. I'm looking at the lineups now for their team, and for me, it was danger from the off. You look at Palace's left-hand side, Tyrick Mitchell, pace, strong, Zaha, an absolute handful, and Jeffrey Schlupp. All right, the pace and muscle compared to there, we're just going to get absolutely done. And if you're inviting a team on as well, just moving further forward before I go into a rant about them being fullbacks and not wingbacks again. Mike, how on earth could you give me some sense of why you'd have two strikers on the bench and start Podence as a false nine against a big physical side? He may have been thinking, let's catch him out with a bit of pace in the movement. But Podence was just dominated, and he needs to play off somebody. If he's not close to anybody, then he can't get your best out of him.
There was one incident quite early in the game where Schlupp commanded the ball off, Podence always with menaces, and took it away from him. That point on, and that feels a bit unfair picking out Podence in that way, because he's never going to win that contest.
No,
he's got no chance against almost anybody. That's not what he's there for. I think he probably is currently in Wolves' sort of best 11, but not there. You've got to assume that Raul was fit to play. I was surprised that he didn't. I could understand him being left out at West Ham, because I'm sure they are trying to sort of manage his resources. So, but it surprised me he didn't come back. Neto starting was a good thing, but he was left all on his own. There were so many things that didn't fit. But once the game had started, and Bruno did sort of allude a little bit to this in the press conference on Friday, because we were all sort of saying, well, he's Neto going to start now? He's the spark you need, all the rest of it. And he said, well, yeah, but I've got several players now who are coming back to fitness, which is great, but that haven't got 90 minutes in them. So I'm cautious about having too many of those. And then suddenly in the first half, once he's lost Hoever, he's then got Johnny for 60 minutes, which looks about the limit for him at the moment. he's got one sub already made, as you just said. Neto, I think we can assume probably 60 minutes was a timed thing. So there's another sub already taken care of. So his room for manoeuvre is completely shut down straight away, because it was begging for at that point for Dendoncker to come on and go to 3 in midfield. But had he done so, he'd effectively run out of subs because the corners was already in. So having started with that lineup, for whatever the reasons were, and the only caveat I would always say with looking at team sheets after the event is you never quite know, are there reasons why players weren't fit to start? Say he was alluding on Saturday to there being several players who couldn't manage 90 minutes for better or worse, and that just limits the options once the game begins. So it became very stuck.
Yeah, it was stuck, but for me, the glaring change, I mean, I thought about it afterwards. I mean, I'm just a fan in the stand. But for me, you could have moved Sace into midfield and gone to a back four. At least then you're pushing one of those wide players a little bit higher up the pitch to go for almost 4-3-3 to match them up, but we didn't. So I can understand the reasoning for not having a sub, because you've already made one, you've had one, and you need to protect another player. I get that. But to have no tactical change, to almost accept that and like you guys both tweeted it out, I think he said he was so angry at half time. He was that angry he did absolutely nothing about it. Now, I don't want to hang Bruno out to dry, because, like he said, Spurs away, Man United away. There's been some great performances. We've seen flashes of some brilliant football, but that feels like a long time ago now. Yes, it feels like the Arsenal game's taken a lot of sting out of us, but with the players that we've got, we have to be better than the last 2 games, because those two teams. West Ham had an easy game, and Palace wouldn't have had an easier game all season. It was if Wolves could have played a tactic to play into their hands, it was the blueprint of how Wolves played at Selhurst Park, and they did it again. And I'm not going to say I'm not going to forgive it, but I'm really struggling to understand it.
But tactically, it was wrong from the start, wasn't it? And I mean, for me, Bruno's done an incredible job at Wolves, but that doesn't mean he's above criticism. And he got it completely wrong. I mean, if you're going to play that 3 in attack, for me, you've got to play Hwang through the middle and then Podence in his more natural position out wide. If you're going to play Hwang, personally, I would have played Silva or Raul in that position, probably Raul, because he'd had the week off before. So tactically, we were never set up to win that game. It almost felt at times when we're 2-0 down, we were setting up in a bit of a 6-3-1 formation, because the 2 wide players were dropping so deep that they were trying to pick the ball up on the halfway line or in our own half. It was just such a mess. It was you've got that Elise who plays for Palace, a really, really good player. We gave him freedom all through the game.
He had a great game, didn't he?
But he's a good player, so you've got to identify that early. You've got Zaha, who can hurt you. We give him acres of space down that left-hand side. We didn't. It was almost as if we didn't even look at a game plan for the game before we entered it. It was, we'll just let them do what we want and let them worry about us. And team like us, you've got to identify the problems and try and deal with them before you get into the match, and we didn't do that, and we got took apart as a result of it. I mean, they were all over us from minute 1, and it was just a complete shambles, and a real surprise for me that was. I thought I expected something out of that game, I've got to be honest.
Yeah, me too, but just going back to without repeating myself, which I'm going to anyway, if you've got the back 5 and you're inviting on that team, there's only one thing going to happen. And the facts that we didn't change it at all until 10 minutes to go. Like I said, even putting Sace up and changing something, that was the most frustrating thing for me. It was almost, I know the players did try a bit harder at the end, but it almost looked like they didn't believe in the plan from the off. Yes, Palace were good and physically dominating Wolves, but there didn't look a lot of belief. And there's some talented players out there, Podence, Neto. I mean, I'm unconvinced about Hwang. There's 2 fantastic centre midfielders, but you could almost probably say that almost every single player had an off day. Tyler?
Yeah, I think Mike alluded to that at the start. And it's not very often every player has an off day, is it? But from Saar all the way through, it's just very flat, wasn't it? And like I said, the only positive for me is Johnny getting minutes. And I suppose coming on to Mike's point about, not having the players or the legs or the minutes. I mean, we're a Premier League football team, and we should have players that have got minutes in their legs to play. But why aren't these guys playing 23s football? Johnny, Bolly, Neto, I'm right in thinking, haven't had a 23s game. They've just come straight back into the fold. And we know what Knocker's thoughts are on the transfer window, and he'll revert back to that. If you're making a rod for your own back, aren't you? If you haven't got the fresh, fit players, and we haven't got players with minutes in their legs, we've only got ourselves to blame for that. Nobody else, in my opinion.
Just to drop something in there, then, if they aren't fresh. Now, if my records are correct in my mind, Toti Gomez and Kundal played, and we didn't lose a game with either in the team, and they're nowhere to be seen. So, I mean, it's not like they played badly either. I thought they had good games. I know at a lot of clubs there's a seniority when senior players are back, but you earn your place in the side. Now, I think Gomez is desperately unlucky, particularly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but was it 3 starts, 3 wins?
I think he did play in 3 games, yeah.
Yeah,
although, given that Saiss, I didn't have a problem with Saiss coming back, but Gomez he was clearly ready, and more ready than I think most of us expected. But equally, Saiss had such a good season to that point, and was only out of the team because he was away in Africa. So certainly, if Gomez is ready to play, and now there is clearly a case for putting him in.
Yeah, I think you were always going to start with Saiss, weren't you? I mean, because of the season he'd had up to the minute. And the same with Kundal. Kundal was always going to be our 4th choice midfielder, behind, obviously, Neves, Moutinho and Dendoncker. So I'm not surprised he didn't come in. But the thing is, for me, I hear a lot from Wolves fans saying, well, you can't have too many players of decent quality because they'll get frustrated if they're not playing. I mean, for me, that's a ridiculous argument. You've got to be able to replace quality with quality if we're talking about finishing in the top 6. And we just haven't got that element. And when we said it earlier on in the season, it was not sustainable what we were doing. It was never going to be sustainable because eventually it's going to catch up with you. You're going to have those performances, and you're going to need to swap things out when players drop out of form. And we've got absolutely nothing to do that. So you're kind of going to have to play your way back into form with what you've got because there's no other choices for me at this moment in time.
And I've said this for a while under Bruno, and I stick by what I say. The more positive they are in terms of attacking intent, the better performance and usually the better result. Spurs away, flew out the traps. Man United, Tyler, when we were there, they pinned Man United back for the majority of that first half. The deeper Wolves play, the worse they are. So what's happened? Where's the regression come from? So, I mean, like I said, Bruno's got plenty of credit in the bank, but I felt like this week highlighted a few concerns that he didn't learn from Palace and he didn't learn from West Ham, and that's frustrating. And I'd liked him to have come out and kind of taken a bit of responsibility. Now we're going to talk about Hoover in a bit, and he got thrown under the bus. But Mike, obviously you deal with the managers every week. When a manager comes out, here we go, and comes out and tells you how well his team played, what are you thinking when he's telling you that?
I'm going to cut them more slack than fans would, and I understand why.
Of course, yeah.
This is my theory on that is, I'll try and keep it brief because I can bore on for ages about this, but I think you have to allow managers up to a point to defend their players a bit. So after the West, I saw a lot of comments from fans about what Bruno had said after the West Ham game. And, he defended them more than was justified. But I understand why he did that. He's gone from one extreme to the other now, which, I mean, there's no good way to play this. I was talking to Rob Gurney, my colleague, earlier about this sort of thing. I think, actually, it really does the managers and it does the sort of education of all of us not a great deal of service that we are always getting the managers' opinions within half an hour or so of the final whistle. When if they've got anything about them, they're probably still full of adrenaline. And it takes quite a mind then to come out and give a completely sober analysis. It would make a lot more sense if we all went back 48 hours later, but we're never going to do that because that's not the world we're in. You all want to know straight away, and so do we. So I've interviewed, I can think of quite a few managers who I've done an interview with on a Saturday night and thought, you don't even think this. And if I came and did this interview with this on Monday morning, you would probably forget we even had this conversation. Others can take it very calmly. I suspect Bruno maybe sometimes at the fired up end, and I've no doubt he was fired up on Saturday, but I'm careful about judging too much. I understand up to a point why managers defend their players. If your boss came out and hammered you in public, you wouldn't be very long before you turned on him. Yeah,
and that's a really fair point. But it gets to a point though when the managers come out, and I know you had some fun with Nuno with the years there, and they're almost giving the same answer week in, week out. And yeah. I understand they're defending the players because they're their staff, but the paying customers, the fans and the people want a sense of responsibility.
Yep.
I don't mind losing. I've watched Wolves probably nearly 1,000 times now in my 30 years. I've seen them lose a lot. But if a manager comes out and says, we weren't great today, and a lot of that's on my shoulders, and I take responsibility, this is what I tried, now it didn't work. Fans would love that. I mean, guys, you know what I mean?
Would they, though? Would they? They would the first time, and they might the second time. I
Can't
think
keep saying it though.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you've absolutely summed up the dilemma for a manager, and I don't know how I'd be if it was. You know, as I say, the only defence I would offer, and it's easy to pontificate about it when it's not you. When it is you, you know, when Bruno or any other manager comes out immediately after a game with whatever emotions he's got pumping, when potentially thousands of people have just been calling him a loser and getting this wrong. It's just for every manager and call him all the names under the sun and going on doing so. And there's some oik who's never done his job, asking him awkward questions about it to put the answers up potentially for ridicule.
But how do you?
But there's no good answer to it. I would agree.
Go on, Tyler.
From a professional opinion, but how do you see the shift being so drastic though, from the West Ham game, which was a week ago, less than a week ago, defending players, to now throwing players under the bus in the space of 6-7 days? I mean, that's a drastic shift in tactic, isn't it?
It is. I don't know whether it's going to be typical of what will happen. I mean, it's the first time we've seen this. I would caution against reading. I think you can read too much into these things. You can sort of plant a story on top of it that fits the facts. He's obviously felt now is the moment, having defended them the previous week. Now is the moment to speak very frankly indeed. The Hoever specific one. That's a very unusual specific case to single out a player like that. And he obviously must have felt that very strongly. But setting that slightly to one side, to come out with such strong comments about the whole team's performance, and yet you all agreed with them. And I did too. So, you know, I feel it is an interesting change of tone.
Do you know, when I hear a manager, Mike, come out and then comment like they've seen the game how I've seen it, it gives me comfort. Like the acknowledgement, we were rubbish today. I sometimes need to hear that. I don't like it, but it's almost like a comfort blanket. Well, thank goodness for that, because after West Ham, and I know what you're saying about defending players, but after West Ham, and I'm seeing we play well today and we want to repeat that next week. Well, I was thinking after the Palace game, you certainly repeated it with a bit extra as well. But I want that comfort after a game, the acknowledgement. If you're going to take the glory and the Manager of the Month award, that's great. But you've got to take the criticism as well. And when it's poor, I just think, well, for me personally, it might not be everybody. I want a bit of acknowledgement. We were poor today. This is what I tried. I know you couldn't do that forever, but that dropping in a bit of, I respect these fans. They come every week. They know this team. Let's hold our hands up and be honest. I think that works really well. I mean, I felt much better, even though it was terrible after Palace. I almost felt like
that's what I was going to say. Did you? If you did, then you got it right in that sense.
Yeah, I needed my slice of meat, and I got it.
but all this is for the birds. If it's not better on Thursday, though, because if it's not better on Thursday, if the same performance comes out on Thursday, then everybody will forget having this conversation, and everybody will be piling in on Thursday, and rightly so.
Well, I think Nuno was terrible for it. He used to come out every week when we lost and talk about solutions and solutions being at the club and all those sort of things. And sometimes I think Ryan's right. You need to hear we got it wrong and we were poor. And I completely understand what you're saying. If you're saying it every week and we're still getting beat, that's one thing. But when the team's been poor and we know they've been poor and the manager's coming out and telling us, we played well this week, we did this, we did that, I think it gets more frustration from fans than probably the performance itself.
Yeah, my feeling would be he overdid it a bit at West Ham.
Yeah.
That was probably right at the weekend. So the Hoover thing slightly separate. But I would be inclined to cut a certain amount of slack, because you can say things in that environment in the half an hour after a game, which maybe you would say in a slightly different way after you'd gone and had a cold shower. And I've interviewed managers standing there talking to them thinking, you really would do yourself a favour if you went and stood in the shower for an hour. And then let's come and have this conversation again, but that's not how the world works. So there it is.
Mike's got a solutions Nuno said it 1,000 times, and he got it tattooed on his neck. He heard it that many times in the interviews over the 4 years. But while we're talking about it, then moving away from the game, we'll go back in a bit. Let's talk about the Hoover comments after the game, and I've got the comments here. He said, Key is a good example of young kids. They want everything to happen now. When you're out there with your teammates playing, you're not training at that intensity. You're not preparing yourself. And after, when you have a chance, these kind of things happen. Let's go on to the next section. I have too many kids in my team at the moment that sometimes don't work the way they should work. They do not prepare the way they should prepare. And after, they come inside the team. These kind of things happen. Now, he was really mad. Now, I know this has had a mixed response, but if I've got two takes on this. If he's not preparing himself properly and the manager can see it, number one, why are you picking him? But secondly, if a player isn't training or preparing himself and he's getting those kind of injuries because of he's not being as fully prepared in his body, then he probably deserves hanging out. Now, I know money isn't everything in it, but if you're a professional and you're representing my club wearing that badge and you're getting paid handsomely to do so and you've got the honour of being at Molineux to play there, I expect everything. And if he's doing that and the manager's hung him out to dry at that time, whether it was a deflection from a dreadful performance, I don't know. But Tyler, I want to start with you with this one. What are your thoughts on the comments?
Yeah, I think Mike called it unique, and I can't remember a Wolves manager throwing a player out like this before. I'm sure it's happened, but I can't think of it, or I can't think of a recent example of it. You know my opinions on him as a footballer so far on what I've seen. I don't think he's up to the standard required to be a Premier League full-back or wing-back. I think he needs to go and play football for a year and develop himself. There was an article today that he seems to think he was genuinely competing with Semedo for the right-back spot. I mean, they're poles apart, aren't they, you know, ability-wise and where they are in their career. I don't ever really like to see it. What's Bruno going to benefit from it? He's thrown a player under the bus. Does that make the other players a bit aware, a bit anxious, a bit nervous about what they might think of him? Have we not seen, I'm reading far too much into it now, but have we not seen Totti and Kundal because they're young players? You know, Bruno was brought in for the way he developed young players, wasn't he? So it does seem strange to throw a 20-year-old who played 20 minutes under the bus the way he did, but I think it can go one or two ways. Like Mike said, it can probably reinvigorate the squad, or it could maybe give him a few more enemies. I don't know.
Michael, what's your take on the situation?
Yeah, similar. I was really surprised that he did. I mean, we had a conversation on the last podcast about Hoover, and I don't think he's improved since the day he walked through the door, if I'm being honest, from what I've seen from him. I don't think he's any better now than he was when we first signed him. The only manager I've really seen kind of do that before was Jose Mourinho. He tended to throw players like Luke Shaw under the bus and try and get a bit of a reaction from them. But I think maybe it was a case of he knew he could get 60 minutes out of Johnny at an absolute push, whereas he'd rather be looking to give him the last sort of 20, 25 minutes, I'd suggest. And whether Hoover hasn't been doing what he's asking him to, maybe there's a bit of an attitude problem there. I don't know. We don't see what goes on in the training ground or in the dressing room, but clearly there's a real problem there. And as a result of an injury, whether it's self-inflicted or just one of those things, we've had to put Johnny in harm's way again. And my argument would probably be that a 20-year-old probably shouldn't be pulling the hamstring, 15, 20 minutes into a football match. So there's a lack of preparation there. But then if there is a lack of preparation there, then what are your coaching team doing? Because they must be able to see that. They must, it can't just be the warm-up to that game. It must be in previous training sessions. So why aren't we clamping down on that early? Why has it got to the public eye before we've really kind of drilled down into what's going on? But yeah, I think it's a real kicking for Hoover. And I think the problem is with Johnny's staggering towards fitness, he's still going to have to play Hoover. So, it's just going to be interesting. Well, yeah.
He won't be for a bit, yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how he reacts when he does get back in the side. If he gets back in the side, is that curtains for him now?
I mean,
we don't
go on,
know
Mike.
Right about this is what kind of character Hoover is to his song. Because if you're managing a football team, and I've never done it, but you're managing 20, 25, whatever it is, different people, and they're all different. In the same way as someone who's managed in any business, and again, I haven't, but people listening to this perhaps have, and you're managing lots of different personalities. Some of them you can, as a manager's cliche, put your arm around them. They need their arm put around a bit. Others you can probably ball out and get a response that way. I don't know what type Keanu Hoover is or any of the other players are. Bruno Lage sees more than we do. He may think Hoover will be the sort of character who says, right, I'm going to show you. or he might shrink away. We're going to find out, aren't we?
Yeah, it's the more I think about it, it almost from a really placid guy that was happy to explain tactics and what he was thinking and to take pretty much any question, Mike. This almost seems like an absolute change or side of the personality we just wasn't expecting. This is a guy he's not really animated on the touchline. He seems quite a very much a coach's coach. He's very intricate. He's very tactical. But this is just out of the blue. Now, whether it's the biggest deflection from taking away from a great performance, well, we're talking it away now, so it has deflected a little bit. But
look, I bet that if you've got a teacher in a school who is very sort of calm and measured, then suddenly one day he's yelling at something, it probably gets the kids' attention more so than a teacher who yells all the time. So the comments are all the more effective because they're unusual. But equally, it might just have been a heat of the moment thing where he's lost his temper, because we've all done that. So
he was so angry though, wasn't he, Mike? He was so angry.
But he wasn't the only one in Molineux who was very angry. But he's the only one whose comments count for anything. We'll find out, but it might be a while before we find out what the effect of the comments were, indeed, whether there was a measured purpose for them or it was just an honestly felt emotion. And who could criticise that if it was? I don't, in a month, 3 months, 6 months' time, we might have a different view on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind if players are dishing out a little bit, because if he's put his arm around him and it's not worked, like you said, Mike, and he's not pulling his weight, then he's got to try something different, because he's tried him because he trusts him. And if it's still not working, you've got to try the last resort. And the last resort is to give him a proper boot. And if he can take it and that pulls himself back together, I know this has been a discussion on Twitter as well, but Hoover's very much, he seems like a very casual footballer, doesn't he? I don't really see a lot of intensity and aggression, and probably that doesn't help as well. But you know what? If Hoover comes back after this, he steps up. I don't know his comments in comparison to Semedo. I mean, it's good to be ambitious, but I think they were very ambitious, to say the least. If he comes back and he's a better player for this, you know what? Everyone's happy and it's worked. I personally don't see it. He's deleted his Wolves stuff off his social media accounts. So it's a full toys out the pram on both sides. So anyway, enough about throwing our toys out the pram. Now, didn't work at West Ham, didn't work v Palace, haven't really got many options again next week. Is it time for a tactical change? Mike, I'd like to start with you with this one.
It's a big jump, because we're talking about jumping away from largely a formation that was working great 3 weeks ago. So I don't think, from what I gather, that Bruno Lage himself is, absolutely wedded to. He doesn't got to be three at the back or whatever because that's his way of playing. I don't think that's the case. But I'd be surprised in a way if it's scrapped, because for up until the last 4 games, it's been going pretty well. I mean, it's essentially the sort of formation they've played in lots of other games. My feeling is that I'd be looking more in midfield and saying, do we need a third person in there at the minute? Is that the key to it? More than I'd be looking as to whether it's a back 3 or a back 4. I don't claim a great tactical knowledge on it, but that would be the first place I'd look. If we put a third midfield, if you put Dendoncker into that midfield, does that give adequately more protection? What are we losing by doing that?
Worked at Spurs.
I think that would be, exactly. I think that would, for me, that would be step one, rather than going to, because if you then change to back 4, that's comprehensively changing a lot of things. It might be a way if you're saying, well, okay, we think for whatever reason Max Kilman needs a bit of a rest now. Okay, can we adapt to a back 4? Are we happy doing that? But it's a less drastic step from a system that has largely worked this season until very recently, to say, well, we go with the 3 in midfield, which, as you say, they did at Spurs, and on other occasions has worked well. So I'm not really expecting to see a change in the formation on Thursday. We'll see.
Yeah, and this is why we brought you on, Mike. Some common sense and some grown-up chat to put us all in our place. But for me, the biggest issue the last 2 games, and I've said it 50 times so far, is the wing-backs. And the problem is if you put Dendoncker in there and you've got Hoover, no, it's not going to be Hoover now, if it's Johnny, and we need those guys to be getting forward. And if they're not supporting and getting forward, it's not wing-backs, it's a 5-3-2. And we can't be doing that at home to Watford. We have to be more positive. Watford faced Arsenal on Sunday. They lost 3-2, but Watford had a go. There's goals in them. There's pace, and they had a go. 4-3-3, similar to Palace, not quite as good as Palace. And that's a concern for me. So, Knocker, Tyler, Are you going to make a change, boys?
I would, personally.
What would you do?
I mean, I'd love to see us go 4-2-3-1, I really would. But I think it's not going to happen purely because he waited till, 73, 74 minutes before he dropped us to a 4 at the back and got more attacking. So I think if that was ever an option, he would have done that at half time. So I mean, if we're playing Ait Nouri one side and Johnny the other side, I think the formation that we're currently playing will work better because we'll have players bombing up the wing as opposed to players who are sitting back. My suspicion is there's a chance he may switch Marcal over and go Ait Nouri and Marcal if Johnny's not 100% or if he doesn't feel confident playing him, in which case we could be in a bit of a similar situation. But yeah, I don't think anything will change. And I think Mike's right, looking at it from a non-impulsive view the way he has, it has worked up till now. It's not like it's been catastrophic. The problem is we are conceding a lot of goals recently, and they're very, very soft goals. So, I mean,
I'm not scoring any.
We're not scoring any. But are we going to get in Europe this season? No, we're not going to go down either. So, if he's thinking next season he wants to switch it to a 4-2-3-1 or he wants to try something different, now's the absolute time to do it. Because worst case scenario for us this season is we probably finish 10th or 11th. Best case scenario, we could maybe sneak 7th, but I think that's probably unlikely. So if he doesn't want to do this next season, I think now's the time to start maybe playing with things and tweaking it and just having a look at some of the players and thinking, are they good enough? Are they going to work in the system? Because he's got some decisions to make at the end of the season, certainly.
Well, this is it, Tyler. I know me and yourself have talked about fall back for ages, but if Wolves lost every game now, they're probably still going to survive and not going to get relegated. If the Wolves aren't really going to concentrate and think they're going to make Europe anymore, then why not have a go now? What do they have to lose? Because I certainly don't want to end the season playing like, yes, Mike's right, earlier in the season there's been some great performances, but the last 2.5 games have been pretty poor and it's gradually got worse. It's gradually got more defensive, more negative, less shots, less ambition. And as I said earlier on, the more defensive Wolves play, the weaker, the more fragile they look. So I don't think he can afford to let the board have another performance like that. And I don't think he can let Molineux on Thursday night, if he lets what tucks in against Watford, the fans are not going to accept that. And you know what, that might sound a bit extreme, but people were angry leaving Molineux because it was such an insipid performance. There was just nothing about it. There was no belief. Now, I do think Raul not being in the team is a big miss, Tyler, but what would you do on Thursday?
I think you know my answer, don't you? I'm a big back four man anyway, whether it was Nuno.
He should be at 6'7".
Like I said at the start, if teams like Crystal Palace and Brighton and whoever else could play with the back four, then why the hell can't we? I can't comprehend it, to be honest. And I just think it always boils down to me, would I rather have that extra player in a defensive position or an offensive position? And for me, it's always the offensive position. And with the personnel, like I said on the last podcast, we need to see the players. We don't know if Bolly's got anything left, but let's see him. Let's see him play. Johnny, if he's fit enough, let's see him play. But we know what certain players can do and we know their limitations. I agree with you. We're not going down. We're not going to finish in Europe. Give Kundal a run of games. Can he cut it in the Premier League? What's he got about him? Let's see him. Coming in for a game and then never seeing him again, it's no good to anybody. So for me, it would always be a back four, regardless of who's the manager and what we're doing, to be honest. And, Knocker earlier in the season used the word sustainable. It had been sustainable because we were winning games and we were nicking them 1-0 and we were keeping clean sheets. We're not doing that anymore. We're letting goals in and we're not scoring any goals. And if you do that, you're not going to win many football matches, are you? So for me, he has to do something on Thursday. I think you're right, Ryan, to almost appease people, to say, look, I'm not settling for this and it's going to be different now.
Well, he has to do it for himself, Tyler, as well, because I'm really passionate, as you could probably tell, about managers coming out and saying they played well. And I felt a bit shortchanged at West Ham. And it was good to see the passion and anger after the game. But what I didn't see is him taking any responsibility. And an acknowledgement of 2 poor performances on the bounce, 2.5 poor performances, for me, would be to make multiple changes and play more attacking football. If it has to be wingbacks with the same personnel, fine, but play higher at the pitch, be more ambitious, give the fans something to cheer about. Molineux's been flat recently, but why wouldn't it be when there's nothing to cheer about? The support works both ways. You need to inspire us and we'll inspire you. It's a team out there. If you're going to tuck in games and not, West Ham was a tough watch, wasn't it, Knocker? Last week was even worse. So I think he owes it to himself. We've seen glimpses of Bruno earlier in the season. Those 3 opening games, yes, we lost them, but that was some of the best football I'd seen Wolves play. And I know people say, yeah, but we lost them all. But Mike, how unlucky were we in those opening games, and how good was the football?
Wolves could have had more points, absolutely. And which, it brings on the lack of goal scoring, the failing to finish off all those chances. Wolves could easily have been on 6 more points than they've currently got. There've been very few the other way games this season where you think they're a bit lucky to win that. Most teams have a few of those in a season. Wolves haven't had all that many of those. So, you could have been better still. Almost regardless of the formation, the big question to me is who he's going to play on the right-hand side, whether it's wing-back or full-back. Because if we assume now that there's no Semedo and no Hoever, Johnny's fitness is clearly in question. He might be fit enough to start, but if he starts, he's unlikely to be able to finish by the look of what we've seen so far.
Here's a question, though, Mike.
And there's another game then coming on Sunday as well.
So would it be easier for Johnny to play as a fullback that didn't have to push forward than a wing-back?
It might be. But then you are then changing a lot of things to solve one problem, and you're sort of chasing the thing around. I mean, I hear what you say there about, you can change the formation to appease the fans. Well, you can, but actually what appeases the fans is winning the game. So it's a very, if you change it and then the team wins, then it's a stadium full of geniuses, and everybody said, "Well, you should listen to it." It's a tempting route to go down. It's a dangerous route to go down for managers. He may go down, but I think if he does change it, he'll change it because he thinks it's the right thing to do, rather than because fans think it's the right thing to do.
One thing we can all agree on is that this formation, we don't score anywhere near enough goals.
Oh, for sure.
We don't create enough.
Whether that's under Nuno or Bruno, we do not score any goal. I mean, you worked it out. Knocker, what, 60 quid a goal if you've been to the home games of the season? That's ridiculous. That's not entertainment, is it? And you see teams like Villa hitting 4, Watford scoring 2 again. We just do not score goals. And this formation doesn't enable us to do it. Whether it's because the front 3, like we've said before, aren't maybe as good as they think they are or we think they are, or whether it's a formation thing. But the fact of the matter is, we just don't score any goals. We just don't.
That's down to the manager. And I know we've talked about our.
You can't put the ball in the net though, can he? He can't shoot. He can't shoot for them.
But he can make them be more positive. And I think if you've got a forward line of Podence, Raul, and Neto, there is goals in that side. But you have to be brave and get them further at the pitch.
But is the goals?
I think there is.
What, 5 or 6 in his best season?
I think there is
a few.
Well, look at last season, though. We had Nuno last season. It was no different. I mean, this is going to be the second season in a row that we've averaged less than a goal a game at the end of the season. That's completely unacceptable. And we had Adama, we had Raul, and we had Podence, or we had Neto in a 3, and we still weren't scoring goals. I mean, our top scorers our top scorer from last season finished on 5. This season, we've got top scorers on 5. No one's going to breach double figures this season. There's absolutely no doubt that's not going to happen. So it can't all be the manager's fault. It just can't be. There has to be some responsibility taken from the players, because this isn't a new thing. Even in the Championship, we weren't banging in loads of goals. There was only a couple of occasions that we really put a team to the sword. None of our stints in the Premier League we've been scoring goals. I mean, look at Brentford. They went in at 3 at the weekend away from home. I know it's only a poor Norwich side they were playing, but they're still putting the ball in the back of the net, and we couldn't win there. So, there has to be some responsibility taken, because there's poorer sides than us scoring a lot more goals than we are at the moment. And we're so focused on not conceding goals that
absolutely.
When we give away that first goal, and you might as well go home. Because the match is over when we give away a first goal, and we don't know how to get back into games. We don't know how to set up to break on the opposition effectively. When we do attack, we find that Hwang's running off down the tunnel most of the time because he's just disappearing up a blind alley. We're not getting ourselves into those dangerous areas. And how many times have we got the ball down to the byline? They're swinging it into the box. There's one Wolves player in the box, and there's 5 or 6 defenders there. It's happening every single week. So
it's not.
There has to be some kind of positive change made.
I've got a question for you then, and I picked out earlier on the performances at Spurs and at Man United, where Wolves went to 2 big sides, went on the halfway line and squeezed and got their rewards. What's happened to that? I mean, yes, Adama went, but he wasn't massive in it. Well, he wasn't at Spurs, the Spurs game, and he put the cross in at the Man United, and the ball came back. But what's happened to the bravery? And that's the manager sets the tone with where you're going to sit and or if you're going to tuck in. What's happened to that? Because those performances show we are capable of competing with those sides. Why can't? Where's the press? Where's the press at West Ham? Where's the press against Palace? There was a lack of bravery from the setup and a lack of belief from the players in those games. We've done it in the past. I don't think there's any excuse for it. I know you change the person and there's injuries, but you can. Right, I need you to. This is your line, and this is where I want you to press. Nothing in the last 2 games.
You used the word aggression, didn't you, earlier in the season, Ryan? That Cody was looking better and Kilman were looking better because they were aggressive, they were attacking the ball, they were getting in front of the striker. The last 3 or 4 games, it's been Nuno's back through, hasn't it? We've just dropped and let the opponents have the ball. And that's the biggest difference for me. You're right. It's the aggression, really. Kilman, like you say, rightly so if he's got stuff going on. But when he's aggressive, he's unbelievable. Well, when he's timid, like he was on Saturday, he looks like he's never played football before. And that's just is that a mindset? Is that a mentality, or is that an instruction from the manager? Like you say, none of us know, do we really?
I mean, what I would say though is, and I know he's split fans, and I don't know why, but the loss of Nelson Semedo can't be underestimated. It's like he came. I think he got injured, then we let 2 in against Arsenal, and then they lost the next 2 games. So it's not a coincidence. Performances have dipped, but that doesn't mean we can't still try. It doesn't all fall round one play. Yes, it's affected Max Kilman. Max Kilman's obviously got some terrible personal stuff going on as well, but it doesn't. There's still players out there that can play football. It doesn't mean you have to tuck in as a back 5. So. Yeah, I think we need more, boys, and I'm expecting a big reaction. If we lost, I'd be mad, but if we lost and attacked, I'd feel a bit better. But Mike, do you not think he owes us a little bit of love after the last 3 games?
Look, absolutely. Look, I mean, they need a performance on Thursday just to reassure themselves. But I mean, they did look a distracted team on Saturday, and again, and as I said earlier, it's very easy to sort of put your own narrative to fit the facts, and we can all do that. But they looked distracted was the word I used in the commentary. They looked uncertain and unsteady. I don't know where the confidence has gone. Maybe it is a little bit easier to sort of do that pressing away from home sometimes. I think Wolves have found it easier to do that on occasions. But there's no obvious reason why it should have gone missing. And there's no great reason to tell the players not to do it unless it is just a symptom of it's such a demanding way to play. And it's so high intensity. And Bruno himself does say, I'm constantly driving the players and it's very competitive in training. And I want it to be that every day. And we're into March and they're shattered, which is a function of having the size of squad, which Wolves have as a conscious decision chosen to do.
Repeating the same mistakes.
Well, it's 5 seasons in a row, essentially, with this policy of having the squad this size, which Nuno, to be fair to him, always insisted was his policy and not the club's. He always said, no, this is the way I want to do it, which is fair enough. It worked the first 3 seasons. Last season, it didn't because they lost players to injuries, which was always a calculated risk that would happen. It could be that this season that they are tired. And playing a high-intensity way is only, I imagine, going to make you more tired. I don't know, because I've never played at that level. But that fits the facts.
Yeah, I mean, this show has been amazing, guys. So thanks so much for so far. Thank you for everyone's comments. There's been loads of comments on Twitter and on here. I'd like to go through a couple of questions now because the interaction, the comments really matter, are a big part of the show. And we've somehow only got 11 minutes left after nearly talking for an hour. So Matt Wolf on Twitter says, will Silva ever get a chance amongst the first 11? My opinion, but you put Silva in that front 3 and we are a different animal. Thoughts on Silva then, guys?
I don't see it as a different animal, to be honest, but I'd have no objection, similar to the point I've just made, if he got a run of games between now and the end of the season. What have we got to lose? Play him, give him 9 or 10 games up front.
What's he got to hurt, yeah?
Whether that's with the 2 either side of him, and let's have a decent look at him. He's come in and out a bit this season. And that must be hard as a footballer. Again, I'm like you, Mike. I've never played at a great level, but
I'm sure you're right about that.
And then you dropped, and then you sort of get a game, and you're off after an hour. I don't see how you can really get into much rhythm. So, in answer to his question, yeah, I'd play him. I'd give him a run of games. There's nothing to lose there.
We'll give the second one for you, Knocker. Give me one good reason not to throw caution to the wind and play 4 at the back. That's Matt again.
I can't because I
I'm
wouldn't do it, to be
glad I
honest.
didn't ask Mike. I'm glad I didn't ask Mike that question because he's already answered that.
I think Mike has kind of answered that question, hasn't he? It's the longevity of what we've achieved so far this season. But I think caution needs to go to the wind now because, in essence, the season's basically over anyway. So let's have a little play.
Third question from Matt. There's some good questions here, Matt. This one go for you, Mike. Thursday will be my second live game of the season. I live in Exeter for the first time since the Burnley game at home. Give me some reason for optimism. It'll be way past my bedtime. Sorry, Mike.
because you like Molyneux, and it's what you do, and you'll go to the game and you'll be fired up when they've started. And it doesn't matter who he's picked; he can pick the groundsman's cat, and you'll still be there. You can cheering them on because it's what you do. Look, of course, I can't give you a logical reason over the last, but is it Wayne? Wayne, you've just said you're going to be driving.
Matt Wolf.
Matt, I beg your pardon, Matt. Matt, if you've already committed, you're going to be driving up from Exeter.
He's probably left now.
You're going to be well done. You'll be fired up enough when you get there. So, look, it'll be worth it. You'll enjoy the experience of going there, I hope. But you'll enjoy it more where they play, and it doesn't matter whether they're 5 at the back, 4 at the back, or they form a circle. As long as they win, you won't be bothered come 10 o'clock on Thursday night.
Do you know when I don't fancy work on a Monday, Mike? I'm phoning you. I'm going to phone you. Mike, tell me what I've got to come to work.
He's motivational. I'm fired up here. I'm going to go. We'll run some Molyneux now.
I'm ready to play myself. Dr. Rock says, why can't we play like the first 3 games when we created all those chances? How do we handle teams that press us? And how do we now handle teams that press us all over the pitch? Eddie, that one's yours, the manager of the month.
Again, I think Mike's called it. It's a high press, high intensity.
No, when teams press us.
I think that. I mean, I'm no tactical genius, like I've said, but there's part of me that thinks Wolves are almost a little bit better when we have to move the ball quicker and we're a bit under the cosh. And obviously, we're very passive. We recycle the ball. We like to keep it. But like you say, an opposing manager, you just say, like you said, put it on our back 3, and they're terrified. You know, Cody says this season has been many times where they've just clicked it, or they've got rid of it, or it's not been good enough. If I'm an opposing manager, I mean, Vieira's got it spot on twice, hasn't he? Press Wolves and get in their face and get into them, and they won't want to know. And it's worked, hasn't it? And teams that haven't done that, Man U, Tottenham, the teams that let you play, we've done well against. So they've got to find a way, haven't they? They've got to find a way of dealing with these teams. You know, we're not a big side, we're not a very strong, physical, powerful side. So then you've got to find another way, and you've got to trust yourself and be good enough, you know, to play out those situations. But we haven't been, have we? Quite clearly.
I've got another question here from Yam Pat. Increased costs of tickets has and is pricing out traditional demographic. The sports spectacle is poorer for it. Is the decline terminal? Now, a previous message he's talking about the atmosphere, different kind of fans. Now, for me, everyone's welcome at Molyneux. I want a full house, but regardless of what we say, I can't put my finger on it. But you must notice it as well, Mike from Coventry. The atmosphere is just not the same. The atmosphere away from home, it's always good because you've got that core of people that seem to have been going for a long time. But what's happened to the atmosphere at Molyneux? I know I mentioned it's a 2-way street, Mike, but I can't put my finger on it.
It has seemed a bit flatter. It's not always as easy for us to pick it up as you think, actually, with the headphones on. But it has seemed flat. It will spark, I think, if the teams start well. But it was collectively very flat on Saturday, and I think there is a relationship between the way that team starts and I'm never persuaded that having what I want to reach the word for disco, which I fear outdates me before the start. But I know they love their music, and but I'm not sure that helps. Turn it off. Let the fans do it. Feel it themselves.
Mike, there's only one song I want to hear before the game, and that's from Harry J. All Stars, and we've just not heard that now for probably.
Maybe not, but I don't think you're going to hear that. But even so,
and now I'm going to play it, and we're going to do a live edition. Not really.
They were still doing it that in the empty ground games, and it was awful before the start in those games. You'd get to they'd read out the teams and all the rest of it, which was lovely. To I don't know who, and then there was this awful hush. In the
who really were they reading the team out to?
No, I don't know. But they went through all the things, and then the hush in the ground was just terrible. And you just thought, this is the point where if you had fans in the stadium and it was like So they would make their own noise. So in a way, I wish they would kind of do that. Just turn the sound off 5 minutes before the start. If you turn it all off, let the fans fill it. I wonder what impact that would have.
It's
if you
worth
actually, if you honestly, you couldn't. And I appreciate it was in a totally different case. And I'm not asking for any sympathy because I was in the ground and you weren't. But it was horrible. It was a really awful feeling just before the kickoff, especially when you're waiting for the TV guys to give the thumbs up after they come out after the break. And it was, you could hear your heart beating. It was
Trust me, Mark. It was as bad to it was bad to watch on the telly as well.
Yeah, but fans would fill that noise. I wonder if that's worth a try just to see, because fans would sing if they did that. If they went all quiet 5 minutes before the start on Thursday, the South Bank would fill that noise, and you'd be away. And you'd be away.
That's a really good point. Might be worth bringing that forward. That's a really good idea. I mean, because of international viewers over the world and the fireworks and all that kind of stuff, I don't see it happening. But for the inside the ground, I mean, as Knocker said a few weeks ago, I don't wish any away fan any harm to or from her in the ground whatsoever. But Molineux is at its best when it's got a bit of spite about it, when it's nasty, and when you're chasing a game, and that's gone for a while now, and it needs to change. Another comment here from Hungry Like the Wolf, and I think these are more on your page than mine, Mike. Why do people call for wholesale changes at the first sign of a bad result? Changing too many things at once puts you out of control and is unlikely to yield an improvement. Also, it feels like some players are carrying knocks or just back from injury, so it's taking their edge off. So it sounds like that's your secret account, Mike. He's pretty much tweeted that earlier on. I think that's the Hungry Like the Wolf. Is Mike Taylor exclusive?
Look, there could be an entirely different team on Thursday. I don't know. I mean, there might be quite an impulsive reaction, but you can end up, I suspect, chasing problem. You make a selection, you make a big change there. Right, I'm going to completely change that, and then you end up chasing it to fill it. Especially if you've got the sort of quite limited options that Wolves have got. But as for asking me why people what was the tweet say? Overreact or react?
Yeah.
I don't know. But one thing I can tell you from years of doing radio phone-ins is that the phone only rings when teams have got beat.
Yeah.
And that is almost a cast iron fact. Short of winning promotion, you get more calls when the team has lost. Because when they've won, what is there to say other than we're great? And you're probably saying that in the pub already. What would you ring some Mike on the radio to tell him?
It took me 2 hours to get home on Saturday. I wish I was in the pub after that. It had a long time to think about what had gone on.
Yeah. I don't know why that should be the case, but it is. So there it is.
Yeah, it's the bad news thing, isn't it, Mike? It's like if there's a positive story, it's like 1 or 2 people will share it. If there's a bad story, like 9 out of 10 people share it. Unfortunately, that's the way it is. There's been some great questions. I've not had a chance to get everybody on in terms of the comments. Mike, thank you for coming on. I've got a couple of minutes left, but this is the crucial part of the show when the experts tell you their first scorer and score prediction for the weekend. Nocky's running the league. We're soon to update that table and get the standings up there. I don't think Nocky's got a point yet. You got a point yet, Knocker? Got of your own league, you've not got a point. So we'll start off
in the league if I don't get one this week.
We'll start off with the guest of the show, Mike Taylor. Mike, please give me your score prediction and first scorer for Wolves v Watford.
Wolves 2-0, Hwang.
We'll take a bit of that.
Checks in the post. Yeah.
We can put positivity on here, Michael. What's his positivity?
Did you not read in the script right before we came?
Send me the money if it wins.
Tyler.
I don't see us winning the football game. I think 1-1 and Dennis, just because I like the fact he's called Dennis.
Have you got him in your dream team?
I think it's a belter, isn't it? I mean, if Dennis.
It's a great day for a footballer, isn't it?
Jokes aside, I think they're lively going forward, and I think they'll cause.
Yeah, it's a danger.
Can we take a point? Oh, that's probably the best I can say.
Well, they're going to come to Wolves for a win, aren't they? They're not coming. They're not going to be tucking in.
Exactly.
Knocker, we've got a minute left. What you got for me?
I actually think we'll have a reaction in this game. I think they're hurting and they'll put a bit of spite on it. So I'm going to go 2-1 Wolves. Neves for the opener.
We'll take that. Well, I'm going to do something crazy like I always do. There's going to be a big reaction. Wolves are going to win 3-0, and Raul Jimenez is going to score the goal. You can all laugh at me.
We haven't scored 3 all season.
It's my podcast, and you can laugh at me. We've almost done an hour now. I want to say a big thank you to Mike Taylor for joining us this evening from BBC WM. Thank you so much, Mike. And also a big thank you to Knocker and Tyler, our regular pundits on the show. I'm Ryan Lester. This has been the Wolves Report. Up the Wolves.